Hello, so my name is Sade Ford, and for my founder presentation for Gender, Race, and Class in the Media, I wanted to focus on Altered Carbon. It is a Netflix original series, and it is a sci-fi with a subgenre in cyberpunk. So basically, I wanted to talk on the subjects of gender, race, sexuality, but mostly focus on class. This show has a lot of interesting concepts, and I hope you can keep up with me. So here's a quick trailer of what the show deals with because I'm not sure I can explain it to the best of my ability. But after the trailer, I'll um, give you my take on what it kind of shows you. So here it is.
Your body is not who you are. You shed it like a snake sheds its skin. You transfer the human consciousness between bodies to live eternal life.
How long have I been down?
250 years.
Their body is just a tool. It no longer is their only body. They can upgrade, they can downgrade, they can sell literally a body. There's a market for it. And this is how I touch upon class distinction within Altered Carbon. So with the concept of stacks, they were created for pretty much for travel because someone wanted to see the stars and you couldn't do it. The person created these stacks. They didn't realize that it would only give some people these opportunities. And by some people, I mean the wealthy, the rich, the people who could afford to buy multiple stacks and back up their souls, who can afford to buy replacement sleeves or clone their own bodies so that once their own body deteriorates or catches a disease or gets disfigured, they can just take their stack out of their past body and upload it into one of their clones. And through this, they essentially stay immortal. They essentially keep control over those who are not able to afford to buy multiple sleeves or upload their stacks or fix their stacks. So these class dynamics, it's even harder for the lower class to break through. It's gotten to the point where in this show, the upper class is literally they live in the sky, while the lower class are called grounders, and they pretty much do grunt work for the upper class. Working the factories, creating more technology, all this so that they can hopefully one day either retrieve new sleeves or upload their loved ones' stacks into new sleeves and just try to live longer. For most of the poor, they only have one body. Joe Millionaire in Women's Positions by Renee Scroy. And the subheading Class and Taste, she talks about how class and taste go hand in hand and how this is how classes distinctify themselves, how you show your class. And I definitely see this in Altered Carbon. Just the fact that the rich definitely have a different lifestyle, a more flamboyant lifestyle than the people who are on the ground. They dress very clean, very styled, very chic and new. The style is very powerful, not only for the men, but for the women also. They have bodies, their sleeves are more dynamic. They have more upgrades. For the women, they even have upgrades that enhance sexual desires and sexual pleasure of the person that they're with. Which I will go more into when I talk about sexuality and gender. This class, they have just the money to blow. They pretty much do whatever they want, and it's reflected very heavily in Altered Carbon to where they are able to manipulate the police force, pretty much get them to do their bidding, while also ruining the lives of certain figures who are not up to standard, who don't agree with them. The class that is shown here is, it's just a really interesting concept to see because you see the lower class people with less options, those who cannot afford a body but were murdered or given you could say public sleeves, so sleeves that were kind of like left behind, that are kind of old or used, so they kind of recycle them, and they're you can see like a 7-year-old girl left in a 75-year-old woman's body, and it's because her parents could not afford to give her an upgraded sleeve. And it's while the rich like just keep popping sleeves out like there's no tomorrow, essentially immortal, essentially with no care in the world. So you could definitely see these dynamics play out within the show. I also wanted to talk about race. So race in the show is a very interesting platform because there's not really a distinction, because a body is just a body. There isn't too much on race that is represented in the show. You do have characters that are pretty diverse. Like the main character is originally an Asian man, but in this new future that he wakes up into, he is a white man. And it's really interesting because you see the flashbacks and he is still him, essentially, and he gets treated no different as an Asian man or a white man. People are just their money, their how advanced their sleeve is, what they're able to do. And I think that's an interesting concept, because once you take away a person's body, you can essentially be whatever you want to be. This person can be whoever in whatever body. So it's mostly power that I see projected in this show. The power of money and wealth over what race someone is. And I kind of like that type of future. The languages that they spoke, Spanish and Arabic and English, was what I heard the most, and it was all, everyone understood each other. So I thought that was great representation. The article is Origins of the Concept of Race by Calianedo and Walton. So with this article, it talks about like pretty much how race formed and why it's kept in power, socio and political power. But in this TV show, there kind of is no concept of race in order to keep power. The oppressed are oppressed because they can't afford to live. So anytime an uprising tries to happen, what happens is they get wiped out, either through virtual means or through physical means, taking away their stacks or destroying their stacks, so that there is no one who is able to have upward mobility unless the wealthy or the higher class wants this person to have upward mobility. And in this case, that person would have to grovel and work for the higher class to achieve that status. So this society is not based on the oppression of different races, but the oppression of a lower class that does have to work in order to survive. I also wanted to talk about the article Latino Images in Film, because as I said, the main female character, who is named Lieutenant Ortega, she's a Mexican. I guess Mexican-American, because I guess the future might be America where she is. They are on Earth. The concept of countries wasn't really established within the show, but her heritage is Mexican. And I do want to say that I didn't see too many markers of the stereotypical images of Latinas that you do see, but she was very pretty, very sexy, and they do have a scene with her being nude. But the concept of nudity, like I said, is different than how it is now, especially since in altered carbon, bodies don't mean much. It is just a sleeve. It is just a tool. And she definitely is someone who I think works her body to be a machine, to be a tool, because as a lieutenant as a police officer, her goal is always to, get the truth, to get justice, and she's very goal-orientated, and although she is very dedicated to family, she is dedicated to her culture, and her mother still, cooks the food of their homeland, and I really like that they put that into the show and didn't strip her character of what essentially makes her herself, including her religious beliefs, because they are devout Catholics, and her mother's family does not believe in stacks. So that's a big part of her journey throughout this show, is whether or not this religious notion to not spin people back up after they do originally die is right or wrong. So yeah, this character does play a deeper role in this TV show, and is not just a stereotype. Now I'm going to talk about a little bit of the sexuality in the show. The show is very sexual. There was a lot of allusions to affairs, and you even have scenes that are placed in brothels, virtual and real. There are a lot of scenes with prostitutes. But the sexuality here is very different. It's very violent, and it's mostly the wealthy who take advantage of these sexual exploitations. Most of them by young women, but also by young men who they deem beautiful, who do this because they are expecting an upgrade in their stack, to the point where some of these prostitutes are killed not knowing that it was an actual permadeath. And the wealthy would just cover it up. And they would have someone covering it up for them, marking them as religious so that they are not able to testify after being spun back up. So, because it was illegal at the time in this show, which is something they were working towards. But as I was saying, the sexuality is very loose, I feel, and that's because I feel like the concept of the body as a tool makes it so that it kind of doesn't matter anymore. You can be a woman in a man's body and vice versa, and who would know? Or if they did know, it kind of challenges the concept of love is love, or a body is just a body. It's still that person, which does happen in the show. They do show someone who is like trans sleeved, I guess you can say, who originally started out as a woman and was put into a man's body, who had a husband at the time who didn't really who did have to adjust to her being in a different body, but still accepted and loved her for the person that she was, and who was still intimate with her, which I do definitely find interesting, because it does challenge the notion of like of how we love, or if it's really a body that we love, or if it's that person, or if it's the soul. So I did enjoy that aspect of it. So I'm also going to talk about the article Making Her Invisible. It talks about how pretty much the media kind of streams this ideal image of lesbian women so that other women are kind of left out of the equation. And I feel like the show kind of does the same thing, but on a larger scale in terms of what people look like. And I know that this show does kind of preach about people like making their own bodies, pretty much choosing what they want to look like. And I guess those choices. I also want to talk about the article Out of Body Image, because I feel like this show really touches on the fact that women feel like their bodies are projects that they have to work on to please the males in their lives. As far as the husband, he literally generated his wife's body so that it was more pleasing to other males and to him, and kept her as a trophy. And I don't mean to say that in this show there was a power imbalance between men and women, but in that relationship in general, where the male, the head of the family, who was male, had most of the money and who controlled the wealth that was rolling through their family, he definitely asserted his power over his wife, not only creating her clones, but genetically modifying them to his pleasure, to what he wanted, not really caring about her, or giving her a choice about what her body would be. They also took that and created their children's bodies. Stopping their children from aging, for instance, was a choice that was taken away from them. And a lot of these modifications were just for sex. Like, there was no other reason but to enhance the pleasure of sex and like what it does for their partner and themselves. And this goes for the prostitutes too, who would literally and other people who worked for the wealthy, including fighters who literally fight to the death in order to win an upgraded sleeve, to win a body that was better than the current one that they had, that would hopefully help them win future fights that was combat oriented, something that this technology brings. And with it comes a lack of humanity, which is obviously explored throughout the show. So lastly, I'm going to talk about the last thing I want to talk about is Where the Girls Are, Growing Up Female with the Mass Media by Susan J. Douglas. I find that her article was very interesting because in this TV show, we didn't really see through a woman's eyes how she is portrayed for her. We saw the mass projection of prostitutes and the exploitation of female and male bodies, but we didn't exactly see what it did to a person, how it made them see themselves. You didn't really see how the media portrayed these women or men in turn. And I feel like that was kind of missing from the show, because I do want to know why the trophy wife saw herself this way with the amount of power and wealth that she has, why she felt like she had to put up this front, why the female police officer felt like she had no limitations to herself, felt like she was a fighting machine, had so much confidence. And is it because there's a lack of media representation within the different classes?